In Dr. Soul's book, The Economics and Politics of Race, Soul states that Chinese, Jews, and Japanese tend to be overachievers in America, while blacks, Puerto Ricans, and Mexicans tend to be underachievers. In short, he theorizes that the variables in economic success or lack thereof is found in the culture of a particular group. The cultures have changed, but has its general premise changed? That is to say, does a group's culture largely determine that group's economic success? There's a lot of evidence supporting Dr. Soul's enlightening theory. I'm Jay Feza from the Rebel.media, and let me explain to you why culture matters. The left would claim that the poor economic standings of certain communities is due to discrimination, and therefore leftists claim that we need governmental intervention to uplift their economic standings. The problem with that argument, though, is that once you open economic opportunities for a group of people, that is to say, once you end government-sanctioned discrimination, it takes a generation for an entire race to uplift themselves from poverty. So there doesn't currently have to be discrimination for us to see clear disparities in income, since poverty echoes throughout the generations. Beyond that criticism of their argument, there are many minority groups who are economically successful and who have made great strides in our society. These include blacks too, from the West Indies and West Africa. They tend to do much better in our country than they did in their former countries. Interestingly enough, we can see the development of wealth as a generation passes. So for example, my parents were poor, and I grew up poor. But because of the choices that I have made in my life, my children will not grow up poor, and if my children do the same as me, alas, we have a strong family net income and inheritance. Therein lies culture. Conservatives as well as Soul would point towards culture as being the determining factor in economic success, and I'm inclined to agree. Allow me to give you two examples of cultural practices that lead to economic success. Marriage. Marriage is a good example of a purely cultural practice that leads to a higher income. A 2005 study at The Ohio State University found that after getting married, people saw sharp increases in their levels of wealth. After 10 years of marriage, the couples reported an average net worth, a gain of around $43,000 compared to $11,000 for people who stayed single. In addition, the median household income of married people is usually around $85,000 to $100,000. Single people's income can be anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000. The exact income, of course, depends on which country you're within. Basically, marriage increases, sometimes doubles your income. Also, if you have children, marriage ensures that your children has the best financial future that you could provide them. Having both a mother and a father in the household almost always leads to children having positive behavioral patterns. Links to the effects that fatherlessness has on children are below. So, marriage is a cultural practice that leads to higher income, and there are no laws preventing anyone from marrying anyone else. So, you can't argue that this is caused by governmental discrimination. What do the stats show? Asian single motherhood, including Japanese and Chinese, are at 7%. Black single motherhood, on the other hand, is at 73%. Hispanics, 53%. Asian divorce rates tend to be far lower than the national average. Black divorce rates, on the other hand, is higher than the divorce rate of any other racial group in America. Black women in particular initiate divorces at nearly double the rate of women from other races. In fact, most black women hardly last 10 years within a marriage. That alone is an indication as to why most black families are disadvantaged in our society. They tend to grow in single mother households without a father and without a strong family net income and inheritance. Therefore, they're going to be poorer on average. Crime. A more pressing reason why certain groups in our society are more economically successful than others is because certain groups, on average, commit less crime. This makes sense. If you commit a crime, especially a violent crime, you'll probably have lower income, as businesses do check for criminal records. The average income of a former inmate hovers around $19,000. It's basically whatever the minimum wage happens to be within your state. Unsurprisingly, the groups of people who make the most amount of income tend to commit the least amount of crime. And then people who commit the most amount of crime tend to have the least amount of income in our society. For the sake of argument, let's just look at the statistics behind violent crimes. So all these numbers come from criminal cases of rape, murder, assault, and so on. The violent crime rate for Chinese and Japanese Americans have always sat around 90 per 100,000, while for blacks it sits around 1,057 per 100,000. Even adjusted for income, that is to say comparing crime rates of poorer Asians with poorer blacks, blacks still commit more violent crimes. Not much more, but more. So do Mexicans, by the way, as the violent crime rate for them is 518 per 100,000. As I said before, this does affect whether or not these groups become economically successful within our society. It's a simple concept to grasp, really. If you're a group of people who happens to commit more crime, even when adjusted for income, then you're a group of people who will probably be poorer. There's no getting around the fact that blacks, Mexicans, and other minority groups commit more crime on average, especially violent crime. So either that needs to change, or we need to continue living in a world where we ignore reality and pretend like it's other people's fault. The cycle of crime and poverty will repeat itself if we ignore this rather serious reality. In conclusion, Dr. Soul's theory and conservative thought on this issue is largely supported by empirical evidence. I've just given you two examples, two great examples of culture determining economic success: marriage and crime. Other examples include what groups tend to study in university. For example, Chinese and Japanese tend to collect degrees from the sciences and technology. Another example are the kind of tactics parents employ to their children. Yes, the whole tiger mom stereotype is a meme, but when critically analyzed, the firm and loving parenting style is a preferable model over the majority of parenting styles, at least if you want your child to obtain higher income. Remember, this is culture determining economic status. That is to say, it's not hopeless. We're actually starting to see changes as second-generation blacks and Mexicans are entering into colleges and obtaining more degrees in the sciences and maths at the average rate of the general population. In addition, we can see the IQ of a race increase by small margins as the generations pass, by the environmental factors that do contribute to a person's intelligence. If IQ is an excellent indicator of a group's current and potential economic standings, then though blacks and Latinos have still a margin to go, 15 points, there is measurable progress, even in the realm of something like intelligence. This is called the Flynn effect, by the way, in case you didn't know, dear viewer. It'd be wrong to permanently stigmatize people like what racists do. At the same time, though, it's also wrong to ignore culture when discussing economic standings of certain groups, like what liberals do. Groups of people can change, but that change is slow, and that change first occurs on the individual level, socially, economically, and politically speaking. We've seen this among many minority groups, not just the minority groups mentioned in the video. You can change, by the way. You can marry, you can stay married, you can have a child that's not out of wedlock, you don't have to commit a violent crime. In a free and open society, a free and open market system, where individual liberty is protected, like today, nothing is stopping you. So go for it. I sure as hell did, and so did many others. I'm Jay Feza from the Rebel.Media. Hey, if you liked this video, please like and subscribe to the Rebel.Media.